The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. A dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is Andre Mayette, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another fun-filled, action-packed show. Today, we are talking with a legend of underground comics, a legend of defending against censorship, and a legend in comics generally all around, and that is Denis Kitchen. And we are also speaking with Kim Munson, the author who wrote a book, Conversation with Denis Kitchen, catching up the readers with many different, the history of his work, but also conversations with the creator himself and everything that has come before. Denis is, if you're into comics, if you know much about the history, the lore of comics, to me, Denis is a very important figure, and I think many people would agree with me, because he was the creator of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, something that has gone above and beyond to defend creators and those who sell or distribute the work of creators of controversial material. And I use controversial in quotes, which you can't see because I'm not a fan of censorship, and I know it's come up before in the show. We do talk about it at length in this interview, but I don't think anyone should tell anyone else what they can and cannot read. If you don't want to read it, don't. If you don't want your kids to read it, don't show it to them. You can't tell the world to make something not exist because you don't like it. And I know that's hard to swallow for some people, but it is true. Stuff is going to be out there. Controversial material is going to be out there. Material that represents people and ways of life that you have nothing to do with and are not related to in any way. But what you can do is just not engage with it. Let it exist. It's fine to exist. You don't need to take it away. You can just let it be. Denis is a proud supporter of that and has created an institution that has helped to defend many comic creators over the years and the people who sell their works from being able to do just that, tell their stories, sell their works, distribute their material, and do so freely, because free speech is important. And even though somebody's story may not resonate with you, it may be from an aspect of life that has nothing to do with you. That doesn't mean that those that it will affect and those that it does speak to don't deserve to have it affect them and speak to them. So let's just let them do that. And thankfully, Denis was a proud part of that. And man, what an honor to get to talk to someone like Denis. And Kim was very gracious to make the interview possible and to be a part of it, to help promote the book that she had written with Denis, or not really with him per se, but rather about him, which is Denis Kitchen Conversations, edited by Kim A. Munson, which he kind of contributes all the different talks and conversations that Denis has had over the years to get a feel for who he is as a person. And I feel like we do that in this interview as well. So, interesting part about doing this gig, about doing this podcast, is that I get to meet some people that are general heroes of mine. And Denis was one of those. So it was very cool to get a chance to talk to him. And very great to talk to Kim as well, and to have her help facilitate it, because, man, what a dream come true to talk to a guy, a legend that has created really, really fun underground comics, and also did so much for the industry itself. And also Kitchen Sink Comics, which he had created as well, which created some amazing works, and helped get a lot of influential artists that we know today out there and let us know about who they were. So all above and beyond, great conversation, great chat with two really great creatives. So let's get into it. Here it is, my conversation with Denis Kitchen and Kim Munson.
See your background, I feel right at home.
Yeah, I just changed my shelf. You could kind of see the gremlins higher before, but there's a ton of them all over the place.
Sure.
Oh yeah, deep. So how are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. Well,
Cold
awesome.
and snowy.
Yes, yes. You guys are both on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm in New Jersey and Dennis is in Massachusetts.
Ah, cool. I'm in Nova Scotia, so I'm a little
Oh,
further above. But we get the same weather essentially, so we're
yeah,
also cold and snowy as well. Deeply
Yeah.
so.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, and I did get a copy of the book that they'd sent along, and I got a chance to peruse it. I didn't get a chance to read all of it yet, but it's awesome. I really, really, really dig it. And
Thank you.
as far as like with comic stuff goes, I think a lot of the times some of the history of the industry gets lost amongst some of the just the sensational part of the work itself. So it's really really makes me very happy to come across folks that are working hard on cataloging it and and making it apparent so people like me can and others can learn about where all these wonderful books came from.
Yeah, well, Dennis and I have known each other for a long time. So, he actually asked me about doing a book for this series because I'd done a previous book for Mississippi Press before, Comic Art and Museums.
Hmm.
And, it was fun to work on Dennis's history because you've had your finger in a lot of pies.
Too many.
Yeah.
To say the least. Actually, the funny part is because when I do these conversations, I generally I treat them like if I ran into you two at a party and we just get to know each other, that's kind of how it goes. So I don't like to know too much because sometimes it makes it like I'm leading too much. But
Uh-huh.
you have this beautiful chronology of Dennis's career in your book that I was looking at, and I was like, oh, that's a good starting point that can to keep you through it. So,
I wanted
um,
to make the book really useful. Like a lot of these books, the chronology is kind of sketchy, but
mhm,
Dennis has done so much stuff that I really wanted to make it a good reference and kind of have make sure that he got credit for some of the more obscure things that he's done. I
mhm,
have a second one coming out next year on Trina Robbins, and it's kind of the same situation where, she was like incredibly prolific and nobody knows like half the stuff that she'd done. So
mhm,
um, I decided to do both projects together because they overlap so much. Dennis really gave Trina a platform when she was kind of struggling. So
mhm.
um, I was glad to be able to do both of them.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of platforms Dennis Dennis provided. It's
Yeah.
funny because going through this, I was when I was getting ready for this, I was like, man, I was looking at some of the books and some of the work, and even some of the things that he was connected to, and I came across two that I was like right in the front of my pile that were my read list,
Ah,
Uh,
which were the and your art book as well. So yeah, I was very happy. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So, Dennis, where did you begin? Where were your origins? Did you begin in Massachusetts? Is that the start
no,
or?
no, I'm a cheesehead originally from
Oh,
Wisconsin, but I've been in Massachusetts for 30 years, a little more than 30 years. So at this point, it's kind of even. But
hmm,
I came out here in the mid 90s to merge Kitchen Sink Press with Kevin Eastman's Tundra,
hmm.
which didn't turn out that well, but I like it in New England, so I've stayed here. No regrets.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful area.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember like what I know, cartooning and the comic strips as part of working on the paper in your local school, but do you remember what the first comics were, the things that got you into comics as a kid?
The first comics I did that
No, that got you into comics. Like what
that pulled me in.
exactly?
Yeah, as a kid, I read every comic book I could get my hand on, and of course the daily newspaper strips. It was the funny stuff originally, like Carl Barks and Little Lulu,
Hmm.
things like that. And of course, I also appreciated the superhero and adventure stuff. Um, so it's hard to say. I also like the horror comics, the
Mm.
mysteries, the crime, the stuff kids weren't supposed to be reading, according to Dr. Wortham. They all were good. Uh, by the time Stan Lee, you know, modernized the Marvel universe in the early 60s, I was in college and rediscovered them. And that was a new period where I dived into Marvel just as he was, inventing Iron Man and Spider-Man and all of that stuff. And I was hooked on them until, my late teens, early 20s. Now I haven't read a Marvel comic and I can't tell you when. So, tastes evolve, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were doing like, because of course, going through your work, it says that you'd work on a humor zine that you did in school, in grade school, and then carried on into university. Um, like, was that like, were you reading a lot of the other sort of humor books at the time, and was that sort of inspiring you into going that route? Because, like, I guess underground comics, as we know them today, weren't really around then. So the concept of taking the humor and sort of bringing it into the cartoony method as skewering things, like I'm sure politics in school and that sort of thing as well. We're all kind of part of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess everything is influenced by what you read, but I think the stuff I did for fellow students was just what I call my innate sense of humor and satire, as I was just beginning to learn what satire was. Making fun of teachers and principal, that was satire. But I had to be careful. If I got too rude, I probably would have lost my privileges of passing around the publication and selling it to fellow students. So had to find a fine line.
Mm.
But it was a great training ground. I'm so glad I was ballsy enough back then to do that. And I learned everything that I later needed to be a publisher, which is, how to print, how to distribute in a sense, collecting the money, the editorial side, writing, illustrating. There wasn't a thing then that didn't evolve and become essential to my future career. But at the time, I didn't know at 13 what I was going to do, but it was the best training I could imagine.
As an
Well,
art historian, sorry,
no, no, go ahead,
as
Kim.
an art historian, I'm always interested in how people get started too. So it was really important to me to publish a whole issue, like toward the end. Like
Hmm.
I think the one that I published was the next to last or something. Because you can kind of see how his characters and like cheesy humor developed into
Hmm.
what became his early undergrounds, the Mom's Homemade Comics.
Yeah, I got a kick out of the scans at the beginning of some of the early Klepto issues, and I like the one that was like the Rolls Royce, the Rolls
Yeah.
Royce one. All the parts are different cars, but the hubcaps are Rolls Royce. It's a real ship of Theseus kind of joke, which I thought was funny. Um, no, that's very, very cool. And it's funny because you mentioned that, like when you mentioned what you want to do, Dennis, and Kim mentioning kind of where people come from. A surprising amount of people I talk to that are artists on this show come from military families, which I find very, I don't know, it seems like I used to think it was just sort of a coincidence, but the more and more as time goes on, it seems like it's becoming, maybe it's just because I'm not sure specifically, but the people that I talk to tend to come from that. So, um, it's always funny because it seems like such a dichotomy that you have such a like someone that's really focused on art when you come from such a regimented military. Maybe it's just a reflection of wanting to do the opposite of what your parents do, or something to that effect. But it always seems like an interesting sort of to me that it seems like a trend.
Hmm.
Was your father a fan of your work as far as drawing and
Well,
cartooning
my
went?
my birth father died when I was 13. I was just
Mm-hmm.
getting started, so I can't say
Oh,
he really was aware. He was a World War II veteran.
mm-hmm.
Um, as to your theory about military families, you may be onto something. Pete Poplaski, my longtime art director, both of his parents were in the Air Force. His mother was a sergeant, and the only woman I knew who served many years in the military. I think the PX on the bases always had lots of comic books. That might be a factor too.
Yeah,
It's a ready source.
absolutely. Um,
I think what I've learned from interviewing other people that have come
mhm.
from military families is that the moving around is
Yeah.
part of it because they have to like kind of find an identity of their own and something that they can do no matter where they are. And comics is just like one of those expressions that stays with people.
Mm. Yeah, I think that might be something because a lot of them say like, I have to make new friends every place I went, but comics are always there, right? So I guess that's something you'd hold on to at that time and take with you and wouldn't be taken. So, oh, that's lovely. Um, well, I guess like getting in, it's a long career, so I don't want to dwell too long on any one thing because I want to make sure I capture a good group of all of it. But Kim, your involvement with you said mentioned that you've known Dennis for a long time. When did you two first meet?
I, around 2009, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, I went back to school and got my master's later in life after I've worked for a while.
Hmm.
And I wrote my master's thesis on comics and exhibitions, which was like controversial then because there wasn't the level of scholarship about comics then that there is now.
Hmm.
I wrote a paper about sort of a string of shows that um, well, kind of influenced each other. Anyway, so I did my first San Diego Comic-Con panel, and Dennis was on it, and he was doing a show called Underground Classics in Wisconsin that was like this incredible feast of underground comic art. And we briefly had a business together where we were trying to promote a tour of that show
Hmm.
and of some of the other artists whose estates he represents, like Will Eisner and Al Capp and Harvey
Hmm.
Kurtzman. So we kind of built on our love of showing things and just stayed friends ever since.
Oh, that's lovely. Awesome. Well, when did you decide, Dennis? I know you mentioned you attempted the military for a while, and I think I read a blurb somewhere that said if perhaps if you had not been allergic to the pants or something, you might still be you might still be a colonel or something today, which I thought was a fun
Yeah,
little.
that was ROTC that I joined in college. And yeah, the pants were wool and I found them insufferable. So I quit after a couple of months or so, and most of my friends were hippies into the early anti-war movement, which I was sympathetic to at the same time, though I had joined ROTC. So when I quit, they thought I had finally seen the light and had become politically enlightened, and I couldn't bear to tell them the truth.
That's really good. So when were the first like you'd done the stuff in school and then you had gotten out? When did you start? So when did Moms begin? Like the Moms Who Made Comics. When did you start working on that?
Um, Immediately after college, as a junior, I had co-founded a humor magazine called Snide at the University of Wisconsin in
Hmm.
Milwaukee. And the editor, we made $800, which was pretty impressive back then. And I was supposed to inherit that when the editor, who was a senior, graduated. But the editor graduated and took off with the treasury.
Oh.
And so I had planned an all comic book issue. And so I ended up, instead of making it a university publication, I just thought, what the hell, I'll just publish my own comic book. And it coincided with the beginning of the underground comics movement. So it all just kind of flowed together. I, you know, Zap started in San Francisco, of course, and I was in Milwaukee, which was not, the hippest city in America. But even by then, the hippie movement had begun, and I thought, what the hell? I put my life savings into printing it, and I was able to do 4,000 copies. And I just naturally had a business sense, maybe going back to being comfortable with it, student publication way back in grade school. So I hustled and I sold 3,000 out of the 4,000 just in my own neighborhood on the east side of Milwaukee,
Wow.
which in retrospect, yeah, was an accomplishment. So that gave me the confidence to do more. And I was approached at that time by one of the two really underground comics publishers, and I jumped at the chance to have a publisher. Unfortunately, they proved to be unreliable, at least in the accounting sense.
Mm.
And so I split with them and decided I'll just do it myself. And that was the beginning of Kitchen Sink Press. If they had just sent me a proper accounting, I would have been happy to be a cartoonist. But no, I was pulled into publishing for better or worse.
I think people really try to rely and exploit on the fact that most artistic folks aren't the most organized, or at least that pay that much attention to when it comes to business things, because they're too happy doing art, right? So it's a real shame when it becomes apparent that that is the case. But most artists would rather just do the art thing and not have to worry about promoting themselves. But
Right.
unfortunately, that's not the case nowadays. Especially nowadays, it seems like you need to have your own promotional office within your your studio, because it's all Kickstarter and those sort of things now where most people go. So, but that's impressive, like to start off with a success level like that. I'd read also in the notes here, this chronology, I got to tell you, Kim, is fantastic. It's rare that I get such a lovely piece to add on to a conversation that you'd gotten some encouraging letters about Mom's Homemade Comics from like Stan Lee and Kurtzman and some others. That at the time, was that like mind blowing? Because I feel like if somebody like legend to me.
It was because at that time they just seemed so far away and
Mm,
untouchable. But they were just regular folks who, if they got a semi-intelligent fan letter in the mail, they were happy to reply. It was a different era.
mm,
I think today, if a fan my age today wanted to reach out to some big shot in comics or anything, it would be a whole lot tougher. Where do you start? How do you find out someone's email or their address or whatever? And so I guess partly it was the times, partly it was luck, and partly it was just being aggressive. I uh,
mm,
I I think the problem with a lot of young creators, and this won't shock you, too many of them are wallflowers. They're just
mm,
by nature kind of shy and on the spectrum, 1 degree to another.
mm,
And I mean, I'm probably on the spectrum too, but I wasn't shy, and that proved to be very helpful professionally, getting a foot in the door.
mm. Well,
Crum has been one of Dennis's longest professional relationships. You just saw him in France like a couple months ago, right? For the documentary.
Yep, yep,
wow,
yep.
Yeah.
That goes way back to I think 69.
Yeah.
wow, incredible. Incredible. Well, the work with Kitchen Sink, I mean, you collaborated with so many cool people and given them like incredibly interesting platforms that have led to like, some big careers, I think, for a lot of folks. Um, like, do you take as much joy from the artistic side of things, like doing the comics as well as shepherding others to be able to kind of achieve their dreams as well?
I missed the first part of that.
Oh, I said, like when it comes to like the books you worked on and collaborating with Kitchen Sink
Uh,
with all these other folks, so like Spiegelman and people like that have gone on to highly regarded careers. Did you find it as equally as rewarding as far as doing art as well as shepherding other people's art and sharing it with the world?
yeah, I mean, yeah. I always say I'd rather be a cartoonist, but the truth is, it was fun working with other creators, developing talent, editing. All of it was appealing, and it's different forms of creativity.
Mm,
Um, at the end of the day, just being a part of it is gratifying.
hmm
And I sometimes maybe an analogy is being a orchestra leader instead of, playing a particular instrument. It's nice to do both.
Well, the
I
interesting
think
thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
I think matchmaking was probably one of your real talents. You seem to be able to um, figure out the best fit for people, like I know you really kind of pursued Howard Cruz and encouraged him to the
Mm,
point where, you know, he actually came out and did gay comics and everything. I mean, that was a long relationship where you developed him, all along. And some people didn't really like his original um, strip, the barefoot strip. Some people
Right.
were criticized it, although I thought it was pretty cool.
well, well, even just commenting on that, like that's a wild, not a wild swing. It's an important swing, but it's a swing that I'm glad you took. But like at the time period when they were encouraging that and putting out books like gay comics, it's not like the public was as open and accepting as folks from that area as they are now. So,
Mhm.
like that was
No,
an
not at all.
yeah,
Especially the comics industry was surprisingly, well, what's the word? Well, at the time we published that in the late 80s, I think, the comics industry was way dominantly male.
hmm
And what I discovered, that I think the first convention I took gay comics to was Chicago Con, and I saw customers come up to the table and they'd pick up every new title we had, and then they would see gay comics and literally not even want to touch it and move to the next one. And I that was a real eye opener to me, and I realized it was a somewhat homophobic industry. And so what I was forced to do was find alternative distribution and reach out to whatever gay bookstores and distributors I could find, which we never dealt with before. And we had kind of a parallel distribution system. So yeah, it was very different then. It's hard for people to understand today how kind of openly hostile it was for a gay cartoonist.
for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
that was around the time that you started CBLDF too. So, I mean,
Mm.
that attitude didn't just carry through the industry, but through, the people that were trying to regulate things.
That's right, both late 80s. You're right.
Yeah, well, that's something interesting I want to get into as well. And mostly, I mean, the fact of what started that, which was that there was a case against a comic book store salesman for distributing offensive material, which in the case were a couple of underground comics, and the idea that like that led to a whole, eventually you coming to their aid, and then eventually leading to the comic book legal defense fund. Like when you talk about just sort of falling backwards into these sort of more serious aspects of the printing industry, that's a big one. So, like the stuff that comes with running a group like that, and lawyers and courts and all that system must have been astounding to begin with. Like it must have been really hard to navigate.
Well, it was all new for sure. Um, but I mean, I'm not an attorney. I learned some things quickly, but basically it was all First Amendment, and you can find sympathetic attorneys, and in some cases it was even pro bono. But
Mm,
we raised money for the purpose of paying specialty attorneys in the geographic areas we needed them, and then you have to trust them. So I didn't get very deep into the law aspects of it, other than is this a case where someone's First Amendment rights clearly seem to have been broken? And if so, let's do something about it. So it was seeing a problem. I didn't see anybody else like immediately jumping to the defense of the fellow in Friendly Franks in Illinois. So I just thought, I'll raise the flag and let's go over the hill, fellas, and everyone will follow.
well, I would have
And
assumed the industry would have been right behind you from the get-go. Like you'd think
well,
if it can happen to
I mean,
you,
no, it more or less did.
yeah.
It was gratifying. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I mean, as you mentioned before with the comics code and the witch hunt, as it were, that came from that. way back when with EC and all those other comic companies. Like, it's always astounded me, censorship in comics and censorship in general. Like as a Canadian, things are a little laxer here, but there certainly are things that are not put in schools that I don't really understand. But when you see, like, I've always been a firm believer that you can kind of, the point of creating art is to create it. If someone wants to buy it, they can. If they want their kid to read it, they can let them. But the
Right.
idea of just saying this is so bad or it offends me so much that nobody should read it is such a egotistical thing. Like any one person can be the benchmark for what's acceptable.
Yeah. Well,
It's astounding. And the fact when someone tries to impact the whole industry with that, um,
Well, strangely, it's still gay and
you know,
trans comics that are getting a lot of criticism. I think Dennis had real foresight that, CBLDF would still be necessary years later. And they've been defending titles like genderqueer and
mm,
other things that have been censored in different pockets in the US.
mhm. Yeah, that's one that I actually just read recently. A local comic store had it here in town, and we did like a book fair, and I grabbed
yeah.
it, and there was nothing. There was nothing in that book, to me, that would be deemed, to the extent that they act like it's gonna. I don't know, man. I've never read anything in my life that made me change who I was as a person or what I desired. I don't think reading a book about somebody's,
Well,
struggle with their defining their gender is going to immediately turn me homosexual or question my own. Like, it's just wild.
I think it came down to in that particular case, a parent in some Tennessee or Kentucky
Hmm.
who saw their grade school, I forget what age, found it in their school library, and so it's one of those things. It's similar to when Dr. Wortham started
Hmm.
criticizing comics, and people started to pay attention to what their kids were reading. And I have to say, when I was, 10 or 11 and buying things off a newsstand, I squirreled them home and kept them in my room. I wasn't showing my parents, hey, look what I bought. If they actually looked at some of the things I was reading, they might raise an eyebrow or worse. But nobody was, running to the police or saying, lock this person up or whatever. Um, it's it's complicated, and I would say, it involves librarians. It involves what's an appropriate age.
Hmm.
Should publishers have disclaimers on books? There's all kinds of things, gray areas, and so nothing's ever black and white. We have to defend it, absolutely.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always going to be something that offends someone. You can't get around that. And
Hmm.
and in our corner of the world called comics, every time I think, well, that's we don't need the fund anymore. Well, something always happens.
Hmm.
And but it's like that in the larger culture as well. We're just a reflection of the kind of social divide we have.
Hmm.
Not going to end soon.
Well, it seems we lost Kim, but she'll probably be back in a sec, hopefully. Yeah, it's always to me, it's always like this weirdly puritanical thing about because it's never normally about violence. It's usually always something to do with sex. It's like,
Usually,
I
yeah.
could watch, I could read a comic where someone gets shot in the face, and that's fine. But I don't have a desire to run out and shoot someone in the face from reading it. But this concept that these people that make these complaints think that seeing a gay relationship immediately makes their kids become or consider being gay. It's just strange to me. It's like it's such an odd combination. But yes, I'm very happy the fund exists, and thank you for starting it. And I spoke with a few people over the years on the show that have been involved with it in one way or another. So it's always nice to see. Welcome back, Kim. Um,
Thanks. I don't know what happened.
it might just be a signal thing. Bad weather, right? So you did work on this book, I see. When Marvel tried to delve their toe into the world of underground comics, like to me, I find that a very interesting story, and just hoping you could expand on that because the concept that like one of the biggest publishers at the time is like underground comics are so big that we want to get a part of that instead of these massive characters and comics that they're putting out already. Like it speaks to how big that movement was and how popular it was. So,
I guess so. And it coincided with Stan Lee was becoming, uh, a media guy himself. He was talking at colleges, he had a side gig getting well
mhm,
paid to talk to students. And I think he was becoming aware of underground comics, and that's what a lot of the students were reading. And so Stan was in his, I think, mid 40s at that point, and he wanted to be hip and with it. And so at that time, I was, I guess, an opportunity for him to plug in on that energy that he saw. At the same time, he didn't want to put out dirty comics or
mhm,
comics that would get him in trouble. So his idea was, what can we do together that'll be mutually beneficial? That was the idea.
mm. So coming up with, I guess, content for a book like that to skirt the line, but also not go over it as far as what's acceptable or digestible from their mainstream audience versus, the sort of no bar limit that the underground comics offered. That must have been an interesting line to tread.
It was, he largely trusted me. The problem was not the content per se. The problem was that I had to negotiate with him a deal different than Marvel normally had.
Mm,
And I said, first of all, we have to get the original art back. That was not part of their policy. And I said, we have to own the copyright. And he said, whoa, we can't do that. But then he compromised and he said, well, we'll have the unique right for, I think, the first printing and a reprinting, but then it can revert to you. I don't care. And then it was like, well, how many swear words? How much nudity? Everything had to be negotiated. And no matter how hard he tried to, you know, retain as much as he could, the bottom line was other Marvel contributors that fabled bullpen,
mhm.
they got upset
Sorry,
because, uh-oh, we lose Kim again?
Yeah, their signal seems to be a little
I
sketchy.
don't know why I keep dropping out. That's kind of weird.
Oh, that's
Um,
unfortunate.
It's okay, we can hear you now.
one of the things that we have in the book, we reproduce a whole chain of letters. Dennis actually did this whole negotiation through letters, and they're all
Nice.
very interesting. And we weren't able to do it on the letterhead. He actually had like different, really creative letterhead that he used for, all of his communications and, but it's great to see how he kind of cajoles Stan into like different things, you know.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's an incredible piece of history. Like that mere conversation, I feel like could be a comic in itself. Like I love the number of swear words. Well, you can use this, and this, but not that. And this many nudities, and that's hilarious. That's really funny. Um, well,
Yeah.
I imagine like negotiating with artists and other publishers and stuff like that. It's always kind of a difficult
Yeah.
process.
So, to finish the story
Yep.
before Kim dropped out there was it was the other bullpen folks who got upset and they said, "Why are you giving these hippies for comics book their art back and special privileges that we don't have? I mean, give it
Mm,
to everybody or nobody." And Stan realized he had kind of opened a Pandora's box and he couldn't shut it easily. And the easiest way to shut it was to kill the magazine.
mm,
Uh, and timing is everything. Martin Goodman, who had been the publisher at Marvel and Timely for many years, he never would have done that deal. But he had just retired and put Stan in charge. Stan became the publisher for the first time. Uh, when previously, he had been editor and writer. So Stan was kind of green in a weird way. And even though I was a lot younger, I had been a publisher for a few years.
Mm.
And I think I very unexpectedly, got the better of Stan in this case because he was eager to do a deal and didn't really think ahead with the repercussions. So the whole thing was, in retrospect, funny to me, but a highly unlikely experiment that didn't do well.
I'm
Well,
I'm
it's
I'm
you know,
headed for a better connection.
oh sure.
Yeah,
Well, it's an interesting, like when you look at the history of Marvel, it's
Here's a
very interesting.
Dennis.
Oh, beautiful. I was gonna say, when we look at the history of Marvel, it's a very interesting side note. Like when you see that they taken the sojourn into that world, one that seemed very foreign from what their usual fare was. It's something I'm really glad to get a comment on from you because to me, it's something I've always been kind of interested in is when these companies sort of step out and try something different and how that happens. So, um, very cool. Well, I mean, you can go through a laundry list of some of the cool creators you worked with. I'm a huge fan of Charles Burns. I see he's done some work with you, and working on with Tundra and Alan Moore and some of that work as well. Um, very, very cool.
Oh,
But get
the big title that Dennis had in that period was The Crow.
yes,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess so. When that blew up, was that like because how long from when the series came out did the movie come out? I feel like it
I don't
was a span of
remember.
a few years. It
Yeah,
wasn't a
I'd
long
have to
time.
look that up. But I mean,
Yeah,
a few years.
yeah.
So yeah, it was selling well for us. But then when the movie was being made and Brandon Lee was accidentally killed on the set,
Mm,
and that got headlines, and then the movie itself probably did a lot better at the box office because of that bad
mm.
publicity. So yeah, we benefited from it. It was by far and away our bestseller. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's also a good example of like some like you think about of around that time period when a lot of the people are going out on their own and deciding to publish their own books, working with independent publishers, making their own characters, getting out of the big system. I mean,
Right.
the Turtles is probably like the biggest one, but like Crow is also one that generally comes up a lot when it looks at like what an indie creator that holds onto his own rights and works outside of the contemporary system can
Yep.
achieve. I mean, that movie and that comic were so unique. I mean, the movie was fun, but the comic itself was very unique and also kind of hitting that weird uh like dark period that people were really getting into comics that were more gothic, like with
Yep.
Spawn and The
It
Crow and a lot
did.
of these other books that were coming out.
It did.
You
But
also you also developed a Saturday morning cartoon around that time called Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
yes, I remember that show.
Really? You saw it?
Oh yes, I think it was YTV in Canada, maybe. It was like it's a kids
Ah,
station. I think they showed it regularly in the mornings.
huh.
I mean, I didn't have cable growing up. I grew up in a very rural area, but my grandmother lived in town and she had it. So I would often go to her house and watch that show. Yeah. I always liked that show. My favorite part was the intro. They just said something like, in the future, dinosaurs return to the earth. And that was like all they needed to explain it. And
Right.
I was like, how?
Right.
But that was like, yeah, I remember that cartoon quite well. Oddly enough, it was a very very neat project. That's,
In the US, it was scheduled against Power Rangers.
oh, yeah, well.
And, you know,
That'll do it.
yeah.
How did that project come about? Like, what was that just
Um, we were approached by a producer who saw the possibilities, and so we ended up Nelvana, one of your
mhm.
Canadian
Oh yeah.
animators. They got involved, and the next thing I know, we actually had a bidding war. We had Fox and CBS TV both wanted it, and
Hmm.
CBS won. Although in retrospect, Fox had the Power Rangers that Kim mentioned, and had we been with Fox, we would have either led into or followed the Power Rangers. Instead, we were opposite them, and it got killed. So there was only one season. But it's like anything else. You have a property that's popular enough, people want it, and so we had also, I think, 30 some toy licenses, and For a few months, it was pretty hot, and then it went cold fast. But
Well,
Mark is still doing Zenizo Tales. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
The TV thing was just a spin-off of it.
hmm. Well, it's just like, to comment on some of the success of some of these projects over the years, like you published The Black Hole, right? Charles Burns's
Yep.
book,
Yep.
which is I've heard recently, I think Netflix is making a series out of it. Um,
Yeah, I'm no longer involved, but I
oh
have heard
yes,
that too, which I would love to see. Absolutely.
I'd be very curious to see how they do it, but I would love it. I've been a big fan of that book for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you find like when it came to, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that when people come to you with these ideas and these concepts, is it merely like they just bring you this is it, or is there a lot of editorial as far as working out the content too, or is it mostly just here's my finished project, my finished idea, let's get to it?
Yeah, it's both. It's
Yeah.
both. I mean, some things come to us full blown and they're great, and you don't have to change a thing.
Mm,
And other times we just get the germ of an idea, I would say, and we work with the creator until we think it's viable. And I would say it's more gratifying in a way when I and my staff were involved. But I also know there's the danger of a committee ruining things. And so at the heart of it, it's what is the germ of the idea, and is the creator or the team that brought it to us capable of fully realizing it and letting them do
mm,
it and not meddling. So that was always in the back of my head. Don't meddle too much.
mm,
Uh, like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which technically is Cenozoic. A lot of
mhm,
people, you couldn't probably have a show called Cenozoic. Most people, it just, I called it Cadillacs and Dinosaurs just to get to the essence of it, because
mm,
that was a marketing decision. But the comic book remained Cenozoic, because if you're part
mhm,
of the comic crowd, you want to know, hey, I know what it really is, no matter what
mhm.
TV calls it.
Yeah.
Uh,
What led to Kitchen Sink kind of combining with Tundra? What was the um
well, that's a long story, Andre, but I would just to cut to the essence of it. Um, the comic market was changing, and a lot of players were coming into the field who were well financed. I was not well financed. And so it was a question of how am I going to survive as the field is getting more and more crowded. And Kevin Eastman, who had made a lot of money from the Turtles, approached me. Um, he had founded Tundra, I think 3 or 4 years earlier, but he had put relatives in charge, a brother-in-law, cousin, and an uncle, none of whom had any publishing experience.
mhm.
And he lost several $1 million very quickly. So he just called me one day and he said, look, I've always liked Kitchen Sink Press. I got an idea. It's either going to be your dream come true or your worst nightmare. And all I heard was, oh, dream come true. And it turned out to be closer to worst nightmare. But, you know, you never know. On paper, it looked like it was a good arrangement. And it did bring me out to New England and it changed my life in other ways. So
Mm,
I have no regrets. The only regret I have is there's a thing called due diligence where you take the time to look carefully into a company you're considering acquiring or merging with. And I would say on both sides, both Kevin and I should have taken more time. We rushed into something, and that's always a mistake.
mm.
So
Sometimes I look at your chipboard doodles in the first book and I see like an angry face with a bunch of knives and stuff. And I always think, okay, Dennis is at a board meeting, you know, getting bad news.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. That's actually like not a bad idea. Is like taking a cartoonist like doodles at different points in their life to see what you doodle at when you're in different stages of what's happiness through frustration through anger through sadness. Um, Cool. Well, you've, kind of went on from that into the sort of looking after, as Kim mentioned earlier on, the catalogs of some pretty titanic uh comic book creators and their work. What led into that? Was that just an extension of doing the editing thing and now going into curating their stuff and making sure it's seen and represented by you?
I'm
Well,
sorry. Oh, you're talking to Kim. Got it.
Well, no, but no, actually, you,
no,
Dennis.
no, he's talking to you. I think Dennis actually started reprinting The Spirit. And when
Mhm.
did you start that, Dennis?
The Spirit, I think, was 71.
Yeah, so he kind of like uh, brought a lot of people like Harvey Kurtzman and Will Eisner sort of back into comics. And
Mm.
then at one point you committed to reprinting all of Little Abner, like 51 volumes or something.
Wow.
I don't know how far you got with that, but you had the biggest Shmoo
Halfway.
collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and you reprinted Terry and the Pirates in 3D at one point. Um,
Oh, right. Yes.
yeah, so you that was like and you've also done, didn't you do with IDW a whole bunch of books about like reprints of newspaper comics, like famous newspaper comics? Or
Uh, yeah, I don't think it was IDW, but yeah, it stemmed from me being a fan of that old stuff and
Mm.
just wondering why they weren't available. I mean, I grew up reading Little Abner. It was probably my favorite as a kid. But then when I was, a professional and a fan, and I wanted to go back and read them all, there was almost nothing in print. And so I had to approach the estate, and they put me in charge of their attorney. And he basically said, "We'll make an offer." I just wanted to do kind of a best of book.
Hmm.
And I gave them an offer, and I think the advance was like $3,000, and he said, get back to us when you're talking real money. And I remember thinking, whoa, that's like as good an offer as I could make for one book. And I remember talking to my staff, and I said, well, how about if we do everything? We'll do the complete Little Abner. I'd love to read them all.
Hmm.
There have to be enough other people. And so we went back and made an offer for that, and that's how it happened. So sometimes it's unexpected. If you have a greedy estate attorney, it it either forced the deal to go away or to become much bigger.
Mm.
And those are just the surprises of getting to know who you're working with. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it was like I loved working with Will Eisner because he was still with us.
Mm.
But when you're dealing with an Al Cap or some of the, even earlier artists, you have to deal with an estate, or even worse, you have to deal with a syndicate, which I say worse just because they're just as greedy, only they keep all the money and the artist gets none, which I always thought was a horrible business model.
Mm. Did you find helping to bring back some of those old Will Eisner stories that were like in the were you surprised by the how much they were accepted by modern audiences? Like you'd think something like Contract with God or those were kind of long forgotten, but to bring them back and to see people, celebrate it and accept
Well,
it.
now I wasn't bringing back Contract with God. He newly created that in
Oh, sorry.
78.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes, yes.
The spirit was brought
The
back,
Spirit was
but
the reprints, yeah.
Will was extraordinary in one way in that he was actually reading some of the underground comics. He was on our comp list, and they were
Wow.
starting to influence him. And one of the things that he especially liked was artists who were doing autobiographical comics, like
Mm.
Justin Green and Jack Jackson.
Beaker.
So, Contract with God, in part, was inspired by that. And
Mm.
it was partly autobiographical, and some of it was covertly
Mm.
autobiographical. Like if you go back and reread the first story in Contract with God. It's about a man who's burying his young daughter.
Mm.
I didn't even know it at the time, but Will had lost his teenage daughter to leukemia when she was 16. So, you know, eventually I got to know everything. But at that time, I was like, I didn't know he was writing about himself or this was inspired by real life work. And then
Wow.
every year, he would, I think for the rest of his life, did a new graphic novel. And it was a great honor to be able to publish those first. And then later, when Kitchen Sink went under in '99, he asked me to be his uh, agent. And so then I ended up helping to place all of that work with other places. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, getting into the work you've done as far as looking after some of these states, right? Because you manage some of these states of some of these artists like Kurtzman, and is it? I guess mentioning do you have to deal with these people in the past to get access to their art for you to be able to publish? Did that inform with you what you would need it going forward to be able to do it for other folks now? Like, do you know the pitfalls and
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Every experience is helpful. Um, if you don't learn from mistakes, then you're not going to do very well with business, are you?
no, fair enough.
Uh,
Well,
but
one of
but
the things that
yeah,
Dennis and I have in common is he's been keeping sort of Will Eisner and some of these other artists alive by doing exhibitions of
Mm,
the original art that he has access to.
wow,
So he's done like big shows in like Angoulême and here in New York and all over the place.
beautiful. To look at some of that stuff must be like I'm a big fan of those artist editions that I think IDW puts out, the big
Uh-huh.
rescans. I have quite a few of them. And to actually see them in real life must be awe-inspiring, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Dennis, you did one of those for Sin City, didn't you, with Dark Horse? Like, I've got one. It's like huge, the Frank Miller Sin City.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are fun to do. Of course, you have to build special bookshelves then. You know.
Actually, I have a library in my house. It's like a sewing room the lady that owned the house
Yeah.
before us had. And my father's a carpenter, so he came over one day and
Uh,
we built a full library out of it. But I made the bottom shelf very high so that I could set them
Good.
on the floor because otherwise I'd have nowhere to get them at. And I have one of the spirit ones as well, which is really nice.
Yep.
One of the ones I had, which was a surprising one to me, was I think it was like Jack Kirby's Prisoner comic book, which
Hmm.
is like from way back when he did like an adaptation of The Prisoner, which is very interesting. But I want to ask you just because I thought it was interesting and I came across it and going through Kim's notes, or her chronology here, is that you were called in as an expert witness when Neil Gaiman against Todd McFarlane. How did that come about?
Well, Neil asked me, and it geographically also, Neil was living in Wisconsin at the time, so he brought suit in federal court in Madison, I think. And I lived about an hour from Madison at that time. And so that was a practical aspect of it. But basically, it had to do with artists' rights.
Mm,
And, Neil had done work for hire for
That was
Todd
Medieval
McFarlane,
Swan,
but
right? Yeah.
yeah.
but in the course of that, he had created new characters that he thought did not fall under giving up all the rights, and that was at
Mm,
the essence of it.
mm, interesting. Very cool. And as far as this book, going through the history of your own work and selecting, what to show, what to share, um, did you find it difficult to like kind of wrap up a decades long career into a few hundred pages? Like,
Well, that book was put together by others, and I
oh,
I cooperated. I think I wrote the cut lines for all the images, but the text is by Charles Brownstein and Diana Schutz and John Lind assembled it all. So I didn't really assemble it. I trusted them. It's hard to be objective. It's just like with
Mm.
Kim's book. I totally trusted her. I sent her a box full of magazines with interviews, and that poor woman had to read everything and select what went into it. And I never second guessed it because it's her book, not mine, you know.
It's
Yeah,
like the
well, and I looked at other things besides
yeah.
the box, but that box did like live in the middle of my office for quite a while. Um, yeah, but I remember actually the oddly compelling book had like kind of a long gestation. Didn't you try to do it a couple times through kitchen sink and it didn't work out? And then finally,
Yes.
like years later, with when you had the Dark Horse deal, it finally came together.
Yeah, it's true. I had announced it years earlier, but again, for various reasons, and part of it, honestly, I felt a little awkward publishing a book about myself. I thought it looked
Mm.
too self-serving. So a couple of
That's
times I
very
postponed
Midwestern
it.
of you.
Yeah. I,
It's
I
not very
post
artistic. Most artists are happy to talk about themselves.
well, so when Dark Horse wanted to do it, then I was definitely comfortable because I could
Mm.
have distance from it. Just so.
Well, it seems like the consummate editor too to let the other people, let their voice come through, even if it's about you.
I guess. I guess.
Oh wow. Well, it's. I just want to. I don't want to keep you guys all day. I know we had a set time here, but uh, to me, it's always amazing. Like I've talked to a few editors over the years, like Mike Carlin, and some other folks, and like the sheer level of what it takes to deal with artists on a regular basis. Like I manage a theater, a performing arts theater, so
Uh,
I'm familiar with it. I'm a graphic designer originally by trade, but through life, I've come to be the executive director of a theater now. So just dealing with contracts and with artists and writers and all that sort of stuff has given me a little bit of insight. I feel like some documentaries like Crumb or the Harvey Pekar movie they made they give slight insight into some of these older underground comics characters, and they really are characters, like people that are very interesting with their own idiosyncrasies, and to corral folks like that and to get the work to come out and in the method you did must have been quite a feat, especially with all those various various interesting people.
Well, I think something that Dennis and I both have in common is we both really enjoy collaboration.
Mm.
You know, obviously it goes better with some people than others, but the relationship, the creative relationship that you develop with people really feeds, um, well, it's just like an important part of life,
Mhm.
those relationships.
Do you feel like I guess just winding this down, do you feel like that I guess it seems like underground comics, the way that we remember them in the past, like it doesn't, I don't feel like there's an equivalent today. I guess it's probably online somewhere, but I don't feel like it's quite as deeply of a subculture as it felt like it used to be back then. Like I'm guessing maybe it's because everything's moved to the internet and you get the occasional zine here and there. But do you feel like there's something as far as like the physical printed getting a copy of underground comics, do you feel like something's lost in the modern world with kind of losing some of that sort of commentary or satire or even some of those unique and strange opinions?
it was just simpler then. It's
Hmm.
we're inundated with so much media now, and underground comics were driven by the subculture that we call hippies, the
Hmm.
anti-war movement of the late 60s, early 70s. And that community was connected to the degree it was connected by things called head shops. And
Hmm.
head shops then were our natural allies to distribute our comics. So if you went in to buy your rolling papers or beads or
Hmm.
psychedelic posters or whatever, there would be a rack or a wall of underground comics. They were all interconnected. It was a subculture. It's hard to maintain that kind of subculture now because there's just so much going on. There's not the same simple connective tissue. I think we're all drawn in so many different directions. The politics are so complicated now. The the things that underground comics did even then, a lot of it now you would argue is sexist and uh, one way or another offensive to someone.
Mhm.
But back then we were just breaking all the rules and we weren't particularly sensitive about it. Now everybody has to be kind of sensitive. It's just so different. So now I forgot your original question,
No,
but
no,
I
that
think
pretty much sums it up.
I think a lot of those concepts kind of like made their way into contemporary graphic novels too.
Mm.
I mean, people write biographies about everything, or, I mean, you can find a graphic novel about just about anything at this point, and they seem pretty um, honest about their feelings.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, like, perhaps so, because some graphic novels, like for instance, genderqueer or something, like aspects of that you would have found probably in underground comics back in the day. But the
Yeah.
fact that it was like a more mainstream book that was published by, a big industry publisher, that I guess that means that like what Dennis started and what others like him over the years have brought, it sort of um it got its way into that stuff. So
Hmm.
it influenced them to a level, or influenced the culture to a level that the idea that you could only go to the underground to find some of these concepts or ideas is kind of gone away, which I suppose is a good thing, but I still miss the cool old little underground comics you used to get.
Yeah, they were kind of the ancestors in
Yeah,
a way.
yeah, an
Yeah,
evolution, I guess, as you were.
yeah.
Well, before I go, I just have one quick question because I'm a fan as well. You worked with the Grateful Dead briefly, I believe, on some comics. Is that true?
yeah.
What was that like?
Uh, well, it was very different for sure. I got to spend an afternoon with Jerry Garcia and find
Wow.
out he was a big fan of comics, particularly EC comics.
Hmm.
So he wanted a series about the band and the band's adventures. And so he laid out his idea of it, and I ended up signing a contract with at the time, the band was represented by Lucas Films.
Oh, wow.
That's just the way it was back then. And
Interesting.
so we ended
Marin
up
County.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah, we ended up doing, I think, 9 issues. But the problem was Jerry was supposed to be involved. We were supposed to talk regularly, and he was going to give ideas that we would flesh out and so on. But I never talked to him ever after that first afternoon, probably because of his addiction issues. And
Mm.
so I was forced to deal with intermediaries like his publicist and manager and people who had some interesting stories, but they weren't from, the horse's mouth, which we wanted.
Mm.
And so to
Mm.
me, the series was always a little disappointing. It could have been much better had Jerry stayed sober and had a lot of good stories to tell. We ended up running out of stories and we were illustrating lyrics. And, you know, that to me was kind of lame, to be honest. Um, the other thing was it appealed to me because it was an opportunity to break out of the comics distribution system and to have something we could sell at Grateful Dead venues where you would
Mm.
have tens of thousands of fans gathered in one place. So we thought, well, how many can we sell at each concert? The problem was the venue was controlled by Bill
Bill Graham. Yeah.
Graham,
Winterland. Yeah.
who was a real son of a bitch. And he, right after my deal was signed, he got involved in litigation with the band. And so we were never able once to sell at a venue.
Oh.
And so it sold well, but it had to sell through comic shops.
No, wow, that's a
Yeah.
real shame. Well, so is the book that they sent me that is out now
Yes.
and available. Where can folks buy it?
Um, Online, all the normal online places. It's published by University Press of Mississippi. So, their website, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you usually get books, you can get the book.
And you have another one coming out next year, you mentioned, about another artist?
Well, I've got another one in the same
Oh, okay.
format about Trina Robbins,
Mm-hmm.
that we're just starting production on. That'll be out in the spring, and I'm developing another book that Dennis is going to contribute to about curating comics exhibitions.
Oh, cool.
That's probably we're going to deliver it. We hope by the end of the summer, and that should be out next year sometime.
Oh, beautiful. And Dennis, do you have any appearances or any displays you're doing with the art coming up?
Not in the immediate future, no.
You have a new book with Fantagraphics coming out, though.
I hope later this year, early next year. Yeah, it's my selected chipboard drawings that have been converted to 3D.
Oh, cool.
They did a book, Jim Woodring's Frank drawings in 3D a few years ago that I loved, and so it'll be that format.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't seen enough 3D books out. It sounds really fun. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, guys. This was a real pleasure and a real honor.
Thank you. Thanks for
Same
having
here,
us.
Andre.
No problem. You guys have yourselves a great day.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And there you have it, my conversation with Denis Kitchen and Kim Munson. What a great chat. What a great talk. Be sure to check out the book at Denis Kitchen Conversations. You can buy it where you buy your books, Amazon, all the usual places. If you have a local bookshop, ask them for it. They can probably order it in for you. Check that out. Also, check out the art book, The Oddly Compelling Art of Denis Kitchen. As I mentioned in the interview, it's one that I have. It's a really cool book. If you love underground comics, if you love what they represented, the subversive nature of just them in general, it's a really cool book and a really great part of comics history. Also, I also mentioned in the talk the comics book, Marvel's delving into underground comics, and check that out too. There's some very interesting stuff in there. It's a weird but fascinating part of comic history. So I can't thank Denis for making himself available for the conversation. I can't thank Kim for making it possible enough for both of their contributions, because man, what a fun chat. And it was a true honor to get to have to talk with Denis. So very glad for that. And thanking my lucky stars that this gig has allowed me to talk to some people that are titans of the industry and personal heroes. So thank you, Graphic Histories Podcast. Thank you, Graphic Histories Podcast listeners, for being a part of it and making it possible. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun-filled, action-packed show. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun, and go read some underground comics, particularly those by Denis Kitchen. They don't make them like that anymore. This program is a proud part of the Swear to Pod Network.